Hi everybody, it's Albert, and in the past I've made reference to Maurice A. Robinson, a professor of New Testament Greek at Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary, who is the leading advocate of the Byzantine priority position, that a very minority position within scholarship that holds the Byzantine text to be the priority text and closest to the original text form of the New Testament. Given that King James Onlyists often claim to be backing the Byzantine text, something that's not really backed in the evidence, because the King James Version does depart from the Byzantine text in numerous places, but it's definitely a descendant of the Byzantine text. But given that position, I think it's interesting to see how the leading advocate of the Byzantine text form views the King James only movement. And he voiced his opinion, and I've heard him voice similar opinions in the past, but since this is fairly recent, in fact in the last few days, I think it bears taking a closer examination. And I do want to thank a YouTube user, Brainaldi, for pointing this article out to me. That it appears on a blog called the KJV Only Debate blog. Apparently this blog is run by some people who formerly were King James Onlyists and have left the movement. So Dr. Robinson did an interview with him, and the whole subject, of course, given the nature of the blog and given the often those in the King James only movement often pointing to the Byzantine text, I think it's interesting to take a look at Dr. Robinson's comments. In the first installment of the interview, Dr. Robinson was asked specifically about the King James Version only position, and his response was, "I do not get involved with nor engage in debates with those holding to the so-called King James Version only position. Those who choose to defend a particular translation as perfect, or in some cases as the only accurate English version, are welcome to their belief. But in reality, these have no real interest in determining the original Greek or Hebrew readings, particularly if such might require correction either to their preferred English text or to the Greek Textus Receptus or Hebrew Masoretic texts decreed by faith to underlie that particular English text. In effect, their only interaction with text-critical issues seems to be to attack or question those who differ from their predetermined position. Thus, it is difficult, if not impossible, to engage in meaningful dialogue with those whose mind is already made up, and who in actual practice allow a relatively late English translation to become the final arbiter of the original Greek or Hebrew autographs. I would make a distinction, however, even while not accepting either position, between those who are King James Version only and have no need whatever for the Greek of the New Testament, and those who are Textus Receptus only and are at least willing to appeal to the underlying Greek for exegetical insight." So here we have the leading backer of the majority text or Byzantine text giving a rather dismissive view of the King James only movement. In the second installment of the interview, Dr. Robinson was asked specifically about certain figures often pointed to by King James Version onlyists, such as Bergen, Scrivener, and Hills, and whether these gentlemen could be considered precursors of the Byzantine priority position that he holds. And he distinguishes between them by pointing out that, in fact, Bergen and Scrivener were not really King James onlyists at all, and you can read that further in the interview itself. And I will put the links to all three installments of the interview in the description box. But in turning to Hills, who more correctly would be considered a King James onlyist, he states, "I would not consider anyone whose primary agenda was the defense of King James Version exclusivity or primacy to be in any manner a forerunner of the Byzantine priority or majority text position, but rather to reflect a more recent and less than scholarly development. This is the situation with Hills, who, regardless of all his former training and apparently favorable comments regarding the Byzantine or majority text, is never willing absolutely to reject any King James Version reading derived from a minority of Greek manuscripts, or even no Greek manuscripts whatever. Through scholastic sophistry similar to that applied by most other King James Version onlyists, Hills ultimately defends every aspect of the King James Version and its underlying text, regardless of where the factual data might point. Like most other King James Version onlyists, Hills also ignores the methodological dichotomy whereby he on the one hand claims Byzantine superiority, while on the other hand he denies such in favor of minority or unsupported readings. This demonstrates a King James Version only mentality quite clearly. In the third installment of the interview, he was asked about any online contributions he makes. It was mentioned that he does contribute to one site, and whether he did things such as blogging or anything like that. And his response was interesting, and the reason he doesn't get involved in such things, he says, well, first, he states, first, I am too busy to blog. Second, I am generally disappointed by the nature and tone of most online text critical or translational comment blogs, particularly since the King James Version only writers tend to monopolize or hijack virtually all discussions. And I have no interest in dealing with what I consider illogical sophistry, conspiracy theories, and agenda-driven propagandistic blather. I think that pretty much makes his position on King James onlyism rather clear. Finally, just to add the exclamation point to all of this, here's a picture of Robinson with leading King James only critic James White. And this was at a seminar White gave last year, and actually during this, White, I'll give a link to the blog post. This comes off White's blog. He speaks of when he met Dr. Robinson. Apparently they had communicated some years earlier through emails, but he finally got to meet him in person last year. And it's interesting that one of the things he does mention at the end, and I didn't pick it up when I had read it. I remember reading this post some time ago, but I did not pick up on this. Robinson actually assisted White in the past in his research into the King James Version only issues, so I find that interesting as well. So here you have basically what is arguably the leading proponent of the majority text position, and what he thinks of King James onlyism. Thank you very much for your time.